The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Willow Creek, casting a golden glow across the sprawling estate of Henry Caldwell. The mansion, with its ivy-covered walls and tall windows, stood like a sentinel against the fading light. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old books. Henry, a millionaire who had built his fortune in steel, lay in a four-poster bed, his frail frame barely disturbing the crisp white sheets. His gray eyes, once sharp with ambition, now stared blankly at the ceiling. At 62, he was dying, and he had made peace with Ida, or so he told himself. Henry had refused treatment for months. The cancer eating at his lungs was relentless, but so was his stubbornness. Doctors came and went, their voices a blur of medical jargon and pity. He didn't want their needles, their machines, or their false promises. He wanted to face the end on his terms, in the quiet of his home, with only his longtime housekeeper, Martha, for company. The world outside could keep its chaos. Here, in the stillness, he could remember the life he'd lived at summers by the lake, deals struck in smoky boardrooms, and the wife he'd lost to time. The town of Willow Creek buzzed with whispers about Henry's decision. Folks at the diner, sipping coffee over chipped mugs, speculated about his wealth, his solitude, and his refusal to fight. "He's got millions," they'd say, but no one to leave it to. Henry didn't care for their gossip. He'd stopped caring about much of anything, except the view of the oak tree outside his window, its branches swaying gently in the autumn breeze. One crisp October morning, a new face arrived at the estate. Dr. Eliza Harper stepped out of a modest sedan, her auburn hair catching the sunlight like a flicker of flame. She was young, barely 30, with a quiet confidence that seemed out of place in the somber mansion. Her green eyes held a warmth that contrasted with the sterile clipboards and stethoscopes of her predecessors. She wasn't here by choice. Her hospital supervisor had sent her, insisting she try to change Henry's mind. "He's a big donor," they'd said. "Do whatever it takes." Eliza knocked softly on the heavy oak door. Martha answered, her face lined with worry but softened by kindness. "He won't see you," she warned, her voice low. "He sent everyone else away." Eliza nodded, undeterred. She carried no briefcase, no stack of charts, just a small leather notebook and a stethoscope draped around her neck. "I'd like to try," she said simply. Inside, the house felt like a museum, all polished surfaces and echoes. Martha led Eliza to Henry's room, where the old man lay propped against pillows. His breathing was shallow, each exhale a faint rattle. He glanced at her, his expression a mix of irritation and exhaustion. "Another one?" he muttered. "I told them no more doctors." Eliza didn't flinch. She pulled a chair close to his bedside, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not here to force anything, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm Eliza Harper. I just want to talk." Henry raised an eyebrow, skeptical but too tired to argue. He waved a bony hand, granting her a moment. She didn't start with medical talk. Instead, she asked about the oak tree outside his window. "It's beautiful," she said, glancing at its golden leaves. "Has it always been there?" Henry blinked, caught off guard. No one had asked him about the tree. He told her it was older than the house, planted by his grandfather. He spoke of climbing its branches as a boy, of carving his initials into its bark. For the first time in weeks, his voice carried a hint of life. Eliza visited daily. She never pushed treatment, though she carried the weight of her supervisor's expectations. Instead, she listened. Henry talked about his childhood, his regrets, the wife he'd buried 20 years ago. Eliza shared stories of her own growing up in a small town, her father's diner, the way she'd always wanted to help people. Her visits became a ritual, a quiet hour each day where the world felt less heavy. But Eliza wasn't just there to talk. She was breaking rules. Her supervisor had been clear: convince Henry to accept treatment, or her job was at risk. The hospital needed his donations, and her refusal to push him could cost her everything. Still, she couldn't bring herself to pressure him. She saw the peace in his eyes when he spoke of the past, the way her shoulders relaxed when she laughed at his dry humor. She began to care for him, not as a patient, but as a person. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Henry's breathing grew worse. He coughed, a deep, wrenching sound that left him gasping. Eliza, who had been reading to him from an old novel, set the book down. "Henry," she said gently, "I know you don't want treatment, but there's something we can try, a simple medication to ease your breathing, no hospitals, no machines, just something to help you rest." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. For the first time, he didn't say number. Eliza's heart raced. She wasn't supposed to administer anything without his signed consent, a formality the hospital insisted on for reliability. But Henry was too weak to sign, and the nearest pharmacy was an hour away. She made a choice. She drove to her clinic, slipped into the supply room after hours, and took a small vial of bronchodilator. It wasn't theft. She told herself, it just borrowing for a man who needed it. She mixed it with saline, filled a nebulizer, and returned to the mansion. Henry sat up, the mask over his face fogging with each slow breath. The medicine worked, easing the tightness in his chest. For the first time in weeks, he slept through the night. Eliza stayed by his side, watching the rise and fall of his chest, her own heart heavy with the risk she'd taken. If anyone found out, her career was over. But seeing Henry's face relax, the lines of pain softening, she felt a quiet certainty. This was why she'd become a doctor. Days turned to weeks. Henry agreed to small treatments, some medications, oxygen, nothing invasive. Eliza administered them in secret, documenting nothing to avoid hospital scrutiny. She knew the consequences: a revoked license, a ruined reputation. Yet each time Henry smiled or told a story with a little more strength, she felt the risk was worth it. Their talks grew deeper. He spoke of his fierce and not of death, but of being forgotten. She promised he wouldn't be. The gentle twist came one frosty morning. Martha, bringing coffee to the parlor, overheard a phone call. Eliza's supervisor, furious, had learned of the unauthorized treatments. A nurse had seen Eliza take the vial, and word had spread. "You're done, Harper," the voice crackled through the phone. "Come back now, or we report you." Eliza's face paled, but she didn't leave Henry's side. She told him everything: her job, the rule she'd broken, the consequences waiting. Henry listened, his eyes sharp again, like the man who'd built an empire. "You risked all that for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eliza nodded, her throat tight. "You're worth it," she said simply. Henry reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "Then let's fight this together," he said. For the first time, he wanted to live, not for himself, but for her, for the hope she'd given him. Henry called his lawyer that day. He drafted a letter to the hospital, offering a donation large enough to make them overlook Eliza's actions. He didn't ask for treatment in return, he asked for her to keep her job. The hospital, faced with the weight of his name and wealth, agreed. Eliza was safe, though her supervisor never looked at her the same. Henry's condition didn't improve dramatically, but it stabilized. The cancer was still there, a shadow no medicine could erase. Yet with Eliza's care, he found months he hadn't expected, months of quiet mornings, shared stories, and the comfort of a friend. They sat by the oak tree when he felt strong enough, its leaves now bare against the winter sky. He told her he'd left the estate to a trust, to preserve the land and fund a clinic in Willow Creek, a one Eliza would run, if she chose. One spring evening, as the first buds appeared on the oak, Henry passed quietly in his sleep. Eliza was there, holding his hand, the room bathed in soft lamplight. She didn't cry, not then. She felt at peace, knowing he'd left on his terms, surrounded by care instead of machines. Martha found her later, sitting by the window, staring at the tree. "He loved you," Martha said, her voice gentle. Eliza smiled, her eyes tracing the branches. "I loved him too," she whispered. The clinic opened a year later, a small building on the edge of Henry's land. Eliza ran it, treating farmers, shopkeepers, and children with the same warmth she'd given him. The oak tree stood nearby, a quiet reminder of the man who'd changed her life as much as she'd changed his. The townsfolk no longer whispered about Henry's wealth or his solitude. They spoke of his heart, of the doctor who'd risked everything, and of the hope that grew in the shadow of an old tree. In Willow Creek, the seasons turned. The mansion stood empty, but the clinic buzzed with life. Eliza never forgot Henry's voice, his stories, or the way he'd looked at her that final day, grateful and unafraid. She carried that with her, a quiet strength, as she tended to her patients, each one a chance to honor the man who'd taught her what it meant to truly care.